We've heard the phrase demographics are destiny a lot on this show, and some countries have basically made that phrase their mission statement. One of the most prominent is Russia, whose leader Vladimir Putin has centered the primacy of population growth for the entirety of the nearly 27 years he has been in power. But as Russia's war with Ukraine grinds on, the state's available levers to increase the population are running out. So what's Putin's latest plan? Well, as best as I can tell, give out a bunch of awards and hope something happens. My name is Josh Borman.
I'm June Sternbach.
And this is Ill Conceived, a podcast about natalism. June, you've moved. My God.
New background. I'm darker.
New background.
Right now. I have no lights.
No, you're completely dark-sided. You're shrouded in mystery.
Yeah, it's like, Forsyth from Earthbound. That's where I'm at right now. That's where I moved to. All I have in this room right now, which is going to mostly be where I record going forward, is just this desk, this computer, a dresser right next to me that's sort of just sitting here for now, and a bed on the ground. So it's it's kind of bare bones right now.
You know what? I think the first time we ever recorded a podcast together, as I recall, your setup at that time was also a bed on the ground.
Yeah. That was before we did this show. That's when you came on my other show before it was called The Computer to talk about South Korea, interestingly. That was like 2 or 3 years ago at this point. But you're right. I've had a lot of moments in my life where my setup, I'm just sort of like by a bed or on a bed on the ground. I have a photo.
This is a certified bed on the floor moment.
It's sort of been a lot of my life, bed on the floor.
Bed on the floor is kind of goated. That's the thing. Like, Japanese people know bed on the floor is sort of where it's at.
It's so nice. I one of these days I might convert to a full tatame situation. Not today, but I do have. I'll put it in the Kill the Computer Discord under the Ill Conceived channel. But I'll post the photo that my roommate took of me while I was getting ready to record that episode with Josh on the ground in my old room.
So this week we are talking about Vladimir Putin, the now long-standing president of the Russian Federation. This is one where I did quite a bit of research. I really went down a few rabbit holes, went onto a lot of Russian websites and used the handy-dandy translate tool in Safari to get a sense of what the fuck is going on.
Yeah.
But before we talk about that, we might as well dig in to something that I know you love, June. And I love as well.
The world famous mailbag.
It's the world famous mailbag.
It's our offspring.
It's another one of our babies. Yeah, the mailbag is a baby as well.
So prolific. So this is from Elmira, titled War Natalism. Hi, Joan and Juice.
Josh.
I always say Juice, but I guess it's Josh.
Or it could be Juice if it's like June. Yeah, maybe it is Joan and Juice.
See, I'm leaning towards that, but Josh just sounds better for how that's spelled.
Right.
Elmira here, in parentheses, still trying on the name. So if Elmira, if you're listening, this is an older email. This is back from like November. If you are using a different name now, let us know. Because this is almost over half a year, or it was over half a year ago at this point. So chances are, who knows? I was wondering if either of you have looked much into modern day examples of war natalism, or the practice of instituting natalist style policies in countries at war in order to recoup their combat losses. In particular, I'm thinking about policies instituted by the Russian Federation that have been expanded or been instituted since it began its war against Ukraine. Last July, which would have been 2025, the Moscow Times reported on a policy in the Russian Federation's formerly Finnish Republic of Karelia that would pay student mothers 100,000 rubles, which is about $1,100, after the birth of a healthy, air quotes around that, baby, not stillborn, and possibly also not disabled, though that was not made clear at the time of reporting. So there's some, there's some qualifications here. As a Ukraine-interested person, I knew about this Russian Federation policy and others like it when they came into effect January 1st, 2025, but I hadn't given the topic any further thought until I started listening to your show. Now that I am a standard baby, thank you, by the way, that's one of our Patreon tiers for those who aren't a standard baby. I feel like I've gotten quite natal-brained And I'm starting to see a lot of the ghastly things that the Russian Federation has done during this war, such as the abduction of Ukrainian children and their subsequent adoption by Russian parents, as having an undeniable natalist stink. Would love to hear your thoughts as they pertain to the Ukraine conflict and or other around the world. Thanks for the read, and thank you so much for the hours of engaging content. Warmly, Elmira, thank you so much. I think, just real quick, I had thought a little bit about war natalism. I think when we first started the show, we were sort of like going into talking about the Trump administration with the idea that they would sort of lean into like a more masculine, very like, the Department of War, that whole framing is to like bolster like the patriarchy in that way, which is, I think, a very similar type of framing in terms of how these two, like the Russian fascists and the American fascists, talk about traditional values typically.
Yeah, that wartime footing, I guess, and the idea of men being the ones who guard the country and women being the ones who preserve and take care of it at home. That's going to be a big part of what we're going to be talking about today, because Russia and the trajectory it's been on, yes, this stuff has become even more acute since the escalation of the war with Ukraine, but this is not a new thing either, particularly for Vladimir Putin. So, June, what's your background knowledge about Putin and where he came up from in his whole deal?
So, I mean, I think the one thing that most people know, I knew for a long time, is that he was sort of an intelligence agency guy. I think, what was it, during the fall or near the fall of the USSR, he was in that branch, sort of intelligence. And he eventually, after it shifted to a more capitalist society, came into leadership for, are they considered center-right party in Russia? What is the specific?
Are you talking about United Russia or I guess the independent party that reformed from the auspices of United Russia? Yeah, I would just call it like broadly right-wing nationalist. That's good. That's a good way to put it. Yeah. Because the thing about Putin is that, he is very much, as you said, a creature of the intelligence state. He was born in 1952 in Leningrad, which of course is now St. Petersburg. So pretty soon after World War II concluded, and his dad was actually in the NKVD during World War II. So doing what needed to be done to guard the state from capitalist infiltrators, up to and including violence.
Strongman intelligence just runs in the family.
And so Putin studies law, actually, at Leningrad State University, which, by the way, he might have plagiarized some of that stuff. That's just a fun little thing. He joined the KGB immediately in 1975 and worked for Soviet internal intelligence. They ended up deploying him to Dresden, Germany, and he was there between 1985 and 1990. So right about the time that the Berlin Wall fell. And at that point, he returns to Leningrad in 1990 to work in city administration there. He really learns pretty early on how the actual mechanics of the police state work, because while he's in Dresden, he's working with the Stasi, the East German secret police. He understands the way that you can leverage the tools of violence, of state-sanctioned violence, against your opponents, as well as develop sort of a group of people who support you under you, and becomes pretty respected and feared within that world from pretty early on.
I think it's fascinating too that he came into the intelligence industry, the intelligence side of things in the government, right as the USSR was falling, because he still does have that connection to it, but he's obviously gone such a different path to almost the exact opposite extreme, the way he rules, his ideology, all of that. It's sort of fascinatingly odd, and horrifying.
Yeah, 1975, that is around the time that Brezhnev is starting to sort of stall out, I guess. And the thing that Putin cares about is not the Soviet Union itself. It is Russia in the context of the Soviet Union. He has an abiding love for the Russian state.
He is like a true nationalist first.
Right.
Just looking at the way he's ruled and all the wars he has declared in my lifetime in the last like over a decade at this point, and he is trying to just regain the territory I think lost under the fall of the USSR, and rebuild like the Russian nationalism, the Russian traditional national identity. He
was also a member of the Communist Party. I mean, obviously you kind of had to be in order to be anywhere in the Soviet Union. Mm-hmm. But you don't hear about him talking about like Marxist thought or anything like that. All of this association, whether you're talking about the KGB, the Stasi, whatever, is a means to an end for him, which is to say accumulating connections with the goal of achieving future power. So by 1990, again, he's back in Leningrad, he's working in city administration. And in 1991, the Soviet Union is fully dissolved. Boris Yeltsin becomes president of the new Russian Federation at this time. And it needs to be noted here, the material conditions of post-Soviet Russia and most of the CIS states, all of the former Soviet Union states, crater by every metric. And it takes a long time to rebuild.
There's so much into why that happened that I feel like we cannot truly cover here. There is so many different things, like, of course, the rise of the oligarchy, selling off a lot of the state selling off a lot of assets to private ownership.
Western capitalist countries and businesses taking a stake in these new private investments with the goal of long-term profit.
Yeah, just a real disaster for the people, I would say, right around the fall. It was a really, really bad time to be in Russia.
But Putin is making waves in Leningrad, and in 1996, he gets a call from Yeltsin saying, hey, do you want to come to Moscow and work for me? And he says, yes, I'm going to go work in the Kremlin. And he does exactly that. Putin is then named prime minister in August 1999. Yeltsin resigns as president at the end of 1999, and then Putin is named acting president at that time. Worth noting as well, 1999 is the year that Russia's fertility rate bottoms out at 1.2 pregnancies per woman.
That's pretty low for that time. Because birth rate, especially in the United States, I believe was around 2.5.
Hey there, editing Josh here, cutting in as we are about to say some inaccurate numbers to give you the actual correct numbers instead. According to CDC statistics, the total fertility rate in 1999 was around 2.07. Notably, 1999 was also when we saw the teen pregnancy rate begin to decline. And as we've talked about before, a lot of the decline in American fertility overall has been thanks to this decline in teen pregnancies. But again, that's the United States in 1999, whereas here we're talking about Russia, where the total fertility rate at that time was 1.2. And so there are a lot of people who are really primed to receive a message of, we need to return the fatherland to the way it was. He's very well equipped to sort of take the bull by the horns at this time. And so Putin runs for president in 2000 and wins.
I was just thinking, I had never necessarily looked into Putin's direct rise into power. I think it's fascinating how quick it was. He was quickly taken up by Yeltsin, and then just within a couple of years ascended immediately. Is there, again, I have never looked directly into that. Is there like, was he just sort of, was Yeltsin looking at this guy and being like, this guy has a lot of potential for leadership? Was he sort of groomed into it in that way? Or was he just like a savant in terms of just like being really like an impressive speaker, very charismatic? Like, what was it? How did he ascend so quickly? I think it's a little
bit of column A and column B. I wouldn't say that Putin is a particularly charismatic speaker, actually.
I agree. He's kind of boring whenever I watch him speak.
He's really boring to watch. Yeah. But what he is good at is knowing how to be in the right place at the right time and how to build relationships with the right people that he can later leverage to his ends. He's a chess master, basically. Okay. I don't think he's literally a chess master. Hold on, let me look that up, because it would make sense if he's Russian that he grew up playing. What is Putin's chess
another Russian stereotype, always into chess.
Yeah, no, he has no actual chess history, but that's the thing that he uniquely excels at. Because he knows how to leverage both people and rhetoric to his own ends, when he takes power in 2000, one of the first things that he does is he announces that his top priority as president is going to be reversing Russia's demographic decline. In September 2001, the government issues something that it calls the Concept of Demographic Development for the Russian Federation through 2015. So this is a 14-year plan. It establishes goals in 3 key groups. They are health and life expectancy, fertility and family strength, and migration and resettlement. I'm just going to say right up top here, a big piece of Russia's demographics and the broader situation here is that Russia is a very ethnically diverse state. Because it's fucking huge. And so much of the tension here is that when Russia talks about increasing its demographics, it is generally talking about having more Russians, which is to say, white Russians. There is also a lot of lip service that is being paid to having more births in ethnic enclaves, in the north and in the southeast, but that's not the main priority. I am not particularly well qualified to talk about the tensions between the different sub-ethnic categories within the state of Russia. We're mostly going to be focusing on the way that these policies encourage more births for ethnic Russians, but I just needed to throw that out there because it's a very important piece of context.
I also do think it's still notable to say that it does seem like Putin generally does primarily just care about strengthening Russian nationalism.
Yes.
Again, that's my read of just the little bit I do know right now, that he sort of, probably absolutely does prefer white Russians.
Mm-hmm.
But I think he really does care about the strength of Russia, especially globally.
He's okay, actually, with more people giving birth who are non-ethnic Russian, so long as they subscribe to a concept of Russian national identity above all else.
Yeah.
So specifically regarding fertility, this is a show about natalism, so I might as well talk about what the tasks were that they set out in this concept for demographic development. They describe their tasks as following: creating prerequisites for increasing the birth rate, comprehensive strengthening of the institution of the family as a form of harmonious life of the individual, creation of conditions for self-realization of young people, and provision of targeted social protection of the family, including the provision of financial assistance at the birth of a child.
Interesting.
So just reading this, I'm curious to hear, June, what your thoughts are on this description of the task ahead of them.
I mean, compared to where we looked in Hungary in particular, and what we've seen in the United States, this feels a little bit less
less fascist,
and of course less fascist.
Yeah.
And you, if I remember correctly, you said this was put out in the year 2000.
2001.
2001. So I feel like at the time, especially, like the far right was wild in the United States, but I don't think they would necessarily code a lot of their policy goals in like the really upfront fascist way that they do these days. And I think if Russia put out something like this today, it would probably be like very similar to what we saw under Orban in Hungary and like under Trump, as we've like seen under Trump so far in Trump's second term today. But it's like looking back over 25 years ago, it's fairly like neutral, I guess I would say. It does still have like the fairly telltale signs of right-wing nationalism that we've seen, of course, like talking about like the family, protecting the social protections of the family and harmonious life of the individual, very individualistic coded. So that it is like right-wing, but it's far less like right-wing, far-right nationalist than I would have assumed it would have been.
Yeah, this is a socially conservative framing for sure. But I feel like, particularly if you're younger, you might not even remember the fact that Russia in the early 2000s was a fairly liberal state, at least certainly relative to how it is today. Yeah. And that Russia also has a long-standing history of excellence in academia and the arts and stuff like that. At this point, I think the average Russian, at least the average Russian living in like Moscow or St. Petersburg, still thought of themselves as on some level European.
Do you think that's changed today?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. I mean, all of those people, well, not all of those people, but a lot of those people who were academics, artists, political theorists, stuff like that, they all left, right? They all emigrated years and years ago because they saw the writing on the wall of what was going to happen next.
Yeah, no, it's a shame. I mean, over my lifetime, it's just, especially the crackdown Putin and his government has had on like LGBTQ rights generally, where it's in a lot of cases illegal to be gay or trans publicly. People will be arrested for that in Russia. Is just horrifying.
I love Russian art and literature generally.
It's fascinating.
I'm a big Chekhov guy, actually. I don't know how much you know about the works of Anton Chekhov, but
I know about his gun.
Yes. It's been a lifelong dream of mine to visit the Moscow Art Theater, and I don't know if I will ever be able to actually do that. And that fucking sucks.
Yeah. Well, we're much younger than Putin, so who knows? A lot could change in the next like 40 years. But I know what you mean. It's like such a repressive state that like, I mean, there is absolutely no reason to visit Russia right now. It could be actively dangerous. Who knows? Yeah.
As opposed to this country, which is never actively dangerous toward any sort of
truth. Yeah.
So when you create a socially conservative plan like this, all of your policy actions downstream of it are going to be grounded in that framework. In 2003, the Russian state heavily restricts availability of elective second trimester abortions.
Ooh.
Up until this point, there has been a fairly wide array of criteria that allow for a second trimester abortion. But in 2003, they narrow it down and they say you can only get an abortion in the second trimester for rape, if the father died during pregnancy, if the father is on like disability or welfare and so would be unable to support the child financially, or if one of the parents is in jail.
That is a horrible restriction on abortion. And if I remember correctly, the USSR was the first country in the world to legalize abortion. So that is like a complete backstep that we've only started to really see in the last like 3 years in the United States. We have sort of kind of followed Russia in this way with abortion, the far right in the United States.
Well, that was something that was really interesting in my research, was reading about the way that so many of these policy shifts were influenced by the Russian Orthodox Church.
Yeah.
They still haven't gotten what they want, by the way, which is a full ban on all elective abortion.
Oh my God.
But the rhetoric that was used to drive these rollbacks, well, it's the exact same rhetoric that the Christian right in the United States co-opted to defeat Roe v. Wade.
Yeah, I'm not sure about a lot of the specifics behind Russian Orthodox faith and like the rhetoric behind it, but I would have to imagine it heavily aligns with American evangelical values and rhetoric and the way the right uses religion to restrict social rights and like general left-wing positions.
I mean, on abortion, they sound like the Catholics, specifically.
That's true.
It's very strongly like this idea of every life must be valued. You're snuffing out a life ahead of its time, things like that.
Yeah, I do love how whenever like the topic of the Pope comes up, because it's always like, oh, we have a progressive Pope, like Catholics, the progressive religion, which
just don't ask him about abortion.
Yeah, don't. Yeah, it's like, there is different levels to this, I suppose. Yeah.
The other thing about that restriction on second trimester abortions, by the way, is that in 2012, this will be further restricted so that only in the case of rape are you allowed to have an abortion in the second trimester.
Oh, dear Lord. So really, it's somehow even worse than the United States.
Well, it depends on what state you're in. In 2004, Putin wins re-election as president by large margins. It needs to be noted that every time Putin runs for president, there are big questions about how legitimate those elections are. He starts throwing up gaudier and gaudier numbers to the point that it's like, wait a minute, why does this look like a scoreboard for a Harlem Globetrotters game? Like the fix seems to be in.
Some of my earliest memories about Russia generally, like in terms of politics, modern politics, is just that. Yeah, the elections are sort of always trumped up in the last 2 decades.
And it should also be noted that like a lot of this is genuine organic support. I think that sometimes when people talk about authoritarian states, they're like, well, they're just doing it and none of the people want this. It's like, no, a lot of the people do want this because the nature of a strong leader is that they're able to get a lot of people in line behind them. It's just that at some point, these numbers become so ridiculous that it's like, yeah, no, there's no fucking way. Not to mention, of course, the way that he is able to utilize his many, many connections to make sure that certain people don't speak out against him on penalty of like getting poisoned, for instance.
Yeah. I mean, I think Russia's far more extreme in that sense, but we even saw similar behavior, not as extreme as, you know, Putin, Russia behavior, but with Viktor Orban, it's just like, oh my God, yeah, this is just like definitely downstream of how Russia does things,
right?
How they do politics.
One of the things that we've talked about a few times now on the show is direct monetary incentives to have more kids. And in January 2007, Russia begins a policy called maternity capital. There's a lot of writing that's been done about this. Basically, the gist of it is that when a Russian woman gives birth to her second or third child, the government gives that mother a voucher that's worth about $10,000 indexed to inflation, but you only get it when the kid turns 3 years old.
Interesting.
And that money, by the way, it's not just money. Like I said, it's a voucher. The voucher can be used to either purchase or improve an apartment. Again, shades of Hungary here, or more accurately, Hungary is a shade of Russia here. It can go into a pension if the mother wants to put it into her long-term savings, or it can pay for a child's education costs.
So it's kind of like a coupon. Some of this, I guess, could be useful, especially education costs.
Yes. And because you can only start to cash in these vouchers when the kids turn 3, payouts under this program don't begin until January of 2010. The thing that's interesting here is that it seems to kind of work. I found a study in 2014 that estimated that this program probably affected an increase in Russian fertility of roughly 0.15 children per woman. So a 0.15 increase in the fertility rate, that is a significant bump.
That's probably the biggest for direct money to people policy that we've seen so far, for sure.
Part of what's going on here, too, is that Russia is doing very well at this point in general, in terms of their overall economy. Between 2007 to 2015, Russia's fertility rate actually goes up from 1.3 to 1.8.
Oh, goddamn. Okay.
Now, again, the maternity capital policy probably has something to do with this, but as we frequently talk about on this show, it probably is more to do with the broader sense that Russia has a bright future ahead of it. The economy is growing. People have more opportunities at their disposal. The country hasn't gone quite full fash yet, although authoritarianism, particularly on the social side of things, is absolutely creeping into day-to-day life.
Yeah.
But people seem to generally feel pretty good about where things are, and that leads them to want to have more kids.
It's I think sort of underrated how much general optimism actually does seem to influence, I mean, a lot of things just beyond, you know, people having children. And for the large part in the United States in particular, there's not been a sense of optimism, I think, in a long time. Yeah.
It's particularly interesting when you compare the situation in Russia at this point to the situation in Ukraine, because Ukraine also had a similar baby bonus policy from 2008 to 2014, but it didn't really move the needle. And the fertility rate in Ukraine was considerably lower than in Russia and wasn't moving up in the same way. But also, the conditions in Ukraine at this point were not as good, and a big piece of that had to do with the fact that the entire country was in this ongoing conflict about whether they ought to align with the West, and like, you know, Europe, or align more strongly with Russia. And economically, they were kind of finding themselves between a rock and a hard place, because aligning more with the West, and especially with the United States, risked Russian aggression. Ultimately, this is an area that historically has been more in this post-Soviet bloc.
And as we know, Putin has one of his goals, maybe not super stated at this point in time in the early 2010s, but especially now it's been obvious he's wanted to reclaim a lot of that land under Russian control. Yeah.
Yeah, he does not see Ukraine as a separate nation or nationality. He sees it in the same way that he sees a lot of those far-flung oblasts in Russia, which is they're Russian. They're a slightly different kind of Russian, but Ukraine is fundamentally Russian. In 2008, Putin gets term limited. He ran first in 2000, won re-election in 2004. These are 4-year terms, and the Russian constitution does not allow you to serve more than 2 consecutive terms. And so Dmitry Medvedev runs instead, but he's just a stalking horse for Putin. Putin gets installed as prime minister and is basically shadow president.
You know, I still have never really understood the difference. Like, I know functionally the difference between like a European like president and a prime minister, but it's kind of goofy as an American to look out there and be like, okay, we have the like fake leader and then this is the real leader.
Yeah,
it's like, what are we doing here?
It totally depends on the country too. Like France, for instance, yeah, the president is the guy and the prime minister is basically a figurehead. But there are some other countries where the president and prime minister share some duties, or you have like the UK where there's just the prime minister. And that's before you even bring the question of the monarch into it.
The second fake leader. That's just there to be ornate a little. Yeah.
Now, remember how I said that the Russian constitution bars you from being president for more than 2 consecutive terms?
Oh, yeah.
That's only terms. That's not per person.
Oh.
So Putin runs again in 2012. And of course he wins by a landslide.
Dear Lord. Dear God, dude.
And this now means that he has effectively been in power for 12 years.
Yeah, I mean, so Putin first got into government, what was it, 1999, 2000?
End of 99.
For most of my fucking life, he has been in power. That's such an insane thing to realize. You know, like looking back at American history, you know, complicated history on some levels with FDR. But it's crazy that this has just not really been a thing in America. You just can't really do that anymore. You are just, I mean, unless, who knows? Who knows what Trump, so far. Yeah, I could be cursing things here.
But that's the thing, right?
Yeah.
You can't really understand what's going on with Trump until you see a situation like this. The entire purpose of everything that he is doing right now is to extend his own power in the same way that Putin was able to do successfully in Russia. He is the template for this shit.
Yeah, and I think it makes so much sense looking at Donald Trump, where he sort of admires these strongman figures across the world. Of course, they align ideologically in a lot of cases with, like, Hungary. He was really close with Hungary, who was really close with under Orban, I should say, with Russia. And all these, all of these different figures popping up in South America now. Even looking at the new ornateness of the White House under this Trump term, where it's like gold everywhere, all of these like gold trims from Temu. It's like looking at like some Russian architecture in some cases. It's like it kind of has parallels in a lot of ways to this like very cheesy ornateness.
Cheesy is the right word for it. Like the fascist aesthetic. It's so fucking cheesy.
It sort of has to be, though, to project that strength to their own base, to keep them amped up.
Now, as the letter writer from the world famous Mailbag sort of mentioned, you can't really understand what's been going on in terms of Russian approaches to natalism without talking about the Ukraine war.
Absolutely.
We're going to get a little bit later into the escalation when they attempted to invade and capture Kiev and all that. But the thing about the Russia-Ukraine war is that it's actually been going on since 2014. And just for a little bit of background on that, we sort of alluded to the fact that Ukraine has sort of been in this position for the past decade or two where the country's almost like in a tug of war between Western USA, NATO, EU sphere of influence and the Russian ex-CIS sphere of influence. And in late 2013, Ukraine's parliament officially voted to associate with the EU, not to join. And in fact, the EU has specifically said that they are not going to extend the offer of membership, EU membership to Ukraine. But the idea was we will sort of have a bilateral association agreement with the EU that will facilitate trade and allow Ukraine to not enter the Eurozone or anything like that, but be more tightly integrated with it.
Yeah, no, this was, I mean, a pretty clear, I guess, red line for Russia.
Yes.
And they held to that for a long time until they didn't any longer, until that red line for them was crossed.
And at that time, the man who was the president of Ukraine then, Viktor Yanukovych, refused to sign the agreement. And this set off basically a constitutional crisis in Ukraine, massive public protest. Parliament actually ended up removing Yanukovych as president in February of 2014. And in response to that, Russia invaded Crimea.
Oh, shit.
And
that's what led to that. I was, I think, too young at that point. I was just starting to follow politics. I was too young to really understand the chain reaction that led to the annexation of Crimea. I didn't realize it was due to like Ukraine's move and the refusal of the president to sign that to the EU. That's crazy. In
Crimea, kind of a buffer zone between Russia and Ukraine, where it is still formally at this time even Ukrainian territory, but there are also a lot of Russian nationalists living in Crimea. The international community does not recognize Crimea as being Russian territory, but for all intents and purposes, it is. Alongside this, Russia began supporting guerrilla operations, guerrilla fighters in the Donbass region. And the Donbass region, of course, is where the next front would be in the Ukraine war that would be coming up a few years later.
So yeah, it seems like the first decade of Putin's ruling was sort of like this reorientation towards this oligarchic like capitalism and building up their economy a little bit more, where it ended right at the USSR, where things were not looking great for the country, and then immediately pivoted into like the wartime economy, which I guess has been going on for over a decade at this point.
Well, that's the interesting thing, too, is that it does exactly line up with when Putin was elected president for his second set of terms in 2012. I think you're exactly right that it was like, okay, we've taken care of our domestic affairs. Now we need to reintegrate the rest of Russia, as Putin would see it, into the fatherland once again.
And I do think the timing on all of this is fairly interesting because it's the end of the Obama era. And Trump's rise is about to begin right around this time too, and I think
this is the second Obama term that this stuff is going on.
Yeah, and I just think it's a fascinating coincidence on some level, but I think the globe around this point, especially in the mid 2010s, was really moving towards this strongman type of nationalistic ideology with Russia and then the United States more blatantly. Many would argue correctly that the United States has always been a very long-term nationalistic project, but more explicitly so with Donald Trump, I think.
Well, and do you remember the 2014 Olympics in Sochi?
I don't. I was like 17 or something.
At that point, Putin had invaded Crimea. And there were a few people who were saying, like, should we participate in these games or should we maybe boycott them?
Oh, I do remember that. Yeah.
There was no formal boycott of the Olympics by any nation, but it's also funny because I remember that was also the Olympics where Russia cheated their way to a lot of success, and then they got caught for doping their skaters and stuff like that.
Yeah, I do remember that. I remember that people had been talking about that this most recent Olympics still, yeah.
But all of this is a shadow of what is about to come in terms of Putin consolidating his power, because in 2020, Putin submits to the general public for a nationwide vote, a constitutional referendum. It's this whole raft of new amendments. It's a lot of them, and packaged in with amendments that will provide for an enhanced social safety net is a great deal of hardline conservative social rhetoric. And most importantly, terms that will further secure Putin's own power as president of Russia.
Of course. Yeah.
So there's three articles that I wanted to sort of point up here. The first one is Article 67. I think that this one best epitomizes the rhetorical tack that they are now taking here. because this is just pure rhetoric. It's not like in a constitution where it's like, oh, these are the things that the state is going to do. It's just, this is how awesome we are. So Article 67, Section 1, the Russian Federation is the legal successor of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics within its territory and a legal successor, legal continuator, of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics as regards membership in international organizations and their bodies, participation in international treaties, and as regards obligations of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics foreseen by international treaties and its active assets outside the territory of the Russian Federation.
So this is basically just land claims to all previous land owned by the USSR.
Pretty much.
Wow. Okay.
I mean, like, it doesn't say it in quite as many words,
but that's what that is. Yeah, that's what that is essentially.
Yeah,
is like we are like we are this. We are no different in terms of what we claim across the world.
Right. And again, this is very Putin coded. That this guy was never a like true communist, but he was absolutely a true Soviet in the sense that he saw Russia as being the thing that controlled all of these other spheres of influence under Russian authority and the Russian language.
Absolutely, yeah.
Section 2. The Russian Federation, united by the millennium history, preserving the memory of the ancestors who conveyed to us ideals and belief in God, as well as continuity of development of the Russian state, recognizes the unanimity of the state that was established historically.
Holy shit. Okay. They're just trying to aura farm. That's what all of this
Pretty
is.
much. It's like, not only are we the successor to the Soviet Union, we are also the successor to everything that came before that, including the SARS.
My God. No, I mean, like, looking at this, it makes sense why the like far right aesthetic for like the last 10-ish years, especially under, again, of course, Trump second term being the prime example of this. It's a just constantly try to aura farm and talk about yourself in this way.
It's bullshit like this, right? Where it's just like, none of this actually means anything. I mean, it kind of means something, but it's
red meat for the base. It really continues to light that fire. Yeah.
Section 3. The Russian Federation honors the memory of the defenders of the fatherland, ensures protection of historical truth. Diminution of the heroic deed of the people defending the fatherland is precluded.
Dear Lord. Okay.
We love our troops.
We would jack off the troops if we could.
We're going to jack off to the troops. Section 4, and this is the most explicitly natalist. Children are the most important priority of the state policy of Russia. The state creates conditions contributing to comprehensive spiritual, moral, intellectual, and physical development of children, upbringing of their patriotism, civic consciousness, and respect toward elders. The state, ensuring priority of family upbringing, undertakes to fulfill parental obligations toward children left without care.
Wow. Okay. They threw the ultranatalist one right here at the end. This is the longest one of all four of these under Article 67.
In terms of word count,
yeah.
This is pretty standard, children are the future, children are our destiny, blah, blah, blah type bullshit.
Yeah.
But this is framing up what the priorities, obligations, and sort of legal continuities of the state are. It's saying, yeah, we care about all Russians, but Russian children we care about the most.
Yeah. And I think especially in retrospect now, this makes a lot of sense, especially as they launch the war in Ukraine. I looked at the stats right before we started here. I think I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but there's been almost 2 million deaths in the war so far in
depending
Russia and Ukraine.
On who you ask, it is anywhere between 500,000 on the low end up to 2 million on the high end.
I probably somewhere in the middle, but even if it's in the middle, close to 1 million, it's like that's a lot of loss.
It's a lot
of
of people.
A lot of loss.
It's a lot of people.
And I think the thing here then is that's why they're like, we are losing a lot of soldiers every year.
Who we need to remember, by the way, we must salute them. We must salute our war dead, right?
They're heroes. They're heroic, and we have to prioritize the children. We need to have a lot more children. Actually, we need more child troops. They didn't say that. but they need to have more children so they can have more soldiers and a stronger national identity.
Yes, exactly. Because this is clearly a national identity protected by a large standing military. That's the idea here. So, June, why don't you read Article 72? This is sort of like the 10th Amendment of the United States Constitution, where it says, unless there is something in the Constitution that is specifically delegated to the federal government, as outlined here in the Constitution, the states get those rights.
Right.
This does that by basically laying claim to every single possible thing the federal government could ever want to do.
Oh, God. Okay.
And this, again, was the thing that made me perk up.
Protection of the family, maternity, fatherhood, and childhood. Protection of marriage as a union of a male and a female.
Yeah, baby.
Wow. Creation of conditions for decent upbringing of children in a family and for fulfilling by children of legal age of their obligation to take care of parents. Wow.
And
holy shit.
This is just one small piece of a much bigger clause, but again, this is just rhetoric.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it is saying...
I mean, it's drawing the lines in the ground here that it's like what Russia under Putin, under this party values is like the traditional patriarchal society, gay marriage, not legally recognized at all. Assuming this has that jurisdiction here. I don't actually know.
It does. It's in the Constitution. It is saying if there's some city or oblast that wants to say that gay marriage is legal, they can't, because only the federal government gets to do that. And they're not going to, because the federal government has now defined, and the Constitution has defined marriage as being between one man and one woman.
Dear Lord. And of course there is that bigotry there. But again, I think for people like Putin, a lot of these hardline nationalists, they are homophobic. But I do also truly believe that on some level, they believe that if they restrict gay marriage, if they restrict LGBTQ identities in any capacity, that will somehow lead to a stronger birth rate, because people will just be like closeted and be like, well, I guess I gotta marry a woman and have 3 kids.
The last one that jumped out at me was Article 81, Section 3. This finally settles the question of how presidential term limits ought to work. June, I would like you to read the first clause of Section 3.
One and the same person cannot hold the office of the president of the Russian Federation for more than 2 terms.
So there you go. That's the first clause right there.
Yeah.
Awesome. So no president can serve more than 2 terms in his lifetime. Wait a minute. What about the guy who's president right now, who's on his 3rd term?
Yeah, probably going into the 4th by this point.
Is going to soon be running for re-election for a 4th term. Yeah, well, here's what they have to say about that. The provision of the Section 3 of Article 81 of the Constitution of the Russian Federation, limiting the number of terms for which the same person cannot hold the office of the president of the Russian Federation, is applied to the person having held or holding the post of the president of the Russian Federation without taking into account the number of terms that he or she had held or is holding this post by the time of coming into force of the amendment to the Constitution of the Russian Federation, introducing the relevant limitation, and does not exclude for him or her the possibility to hold the post of the president of the Russian Federation during the terms allowed by this provision.
They call this the amendment.
Isn't that so fucking funny?
Yeah.
Like, just as written, too, it's so inelegant.
Yeah. I mean,
they might as well have just written, none of the above applies if you are Vladimir Putin. Genuinely.
Yeah, Putin rules. The Putin rules amendment. Yeah.
Just awesome.
Crazy, dude. So, okay, my question is, of course, we can't know this yet because we're still, I think, on Putin's 4th term.
Correct.
What do they do after? I mean, I know there's rumors of him like having cancer. I don't know if any of that's necessarily true. Is he just like finally just is he going to become prime minister again? Like does anyone have any idea?
I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if he sort of does that again, where he's like, well, I'll be prime minister and I'll run somebody else to be president. Or who knows? Maybe he'll pass another constitutional amendment extending his term even further. At the end of the day, as it stands right now, I mean, here's the thing. In the 2024 presidential election, he won 88% of the vote.
Dear Lord, dude. God.
It's ultimately the question is not, will he serve longer? It's what will he do so that he can serve longer, as far as I see it.
Yeah. And I mean, again, there is some fucked up shit with elections, but Russia fucking loves this maniac. Yeah. It's just true. They do. Yeah. It's wild.
So pretty soon off the back of this successful constitution, in February 2022, Russia launches a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. And they actually push in from 3 different fronts. There's a northern front going in through Belarus, as well as eastern fronts going in from the eastern part of Russia that borders Ukraine. I'm sure you remember the day where it looked like Russia was going to capture Kiev.
Oh my
and
God,
it was like a matter of, it's going to be within hours. And Zelensky just being like, yeah, no, I'm not going to leave, and just sticking it out. And then the motherfuckers pulled it off. They were able to then rebuff the Russian advance and push them back to the Belarusian and Russian border.
The one thing I do especially remember from that time is I didn't think this would happen. That's one of the things
I didn't either.
One of the things people give me shit for to this day, which I, get your licks in, absolutely. But like, I was on record being like, I don't think Russia and Putin is crazy enough to try to do this, because it truly seemed insane to just be like, we're going to start a war against Ukraine, especially at the time. I feel like there had been a lot of like pseudo wars, especially started by the United States, but there has never been like a full planned launch invasion in a while, at least in my lifetime. There hasn't been a lot of those. It really felt like on some level that like you didn't really do that anymore.
I was in the same boat as you. I was like, yes, I absolutely can see Putin like saber rattling.
Yeah.
I can even see him massing troops at the border as a show of strength, because a big piece of what was going on here as well was that the United States was in conversation with Ukraine about forward deploying missile systems in Ukraine. Mm-hmm. And so part of this as well was Russia pushing back on that because they felt that it was going into their sphere of sovereignty. And the U.S. was nevertheless pushing forward with this plan.
Yeah.
And I was like, but they're not really gonna like try to capture Kiev, right? That would be insane.
Yeah. And they did. They tried that. And it's been it's been over 4 years. What an unbelievable amount of time that this has been going on. And of course, as I mentioned before, a lot of loss of life. A lot of people, not even included in the loss of life, people have moved out of both Russia and Ukraine, especially closer to the front lines of both of these wars. I mean, like in Chicago, there is a fairly like Ukrainian village. I'm sure you know, Josh. A lot of Ukrainian people, if you go to that part of town, a lot of historical Ukrainian people live in this part of town, but a lot of people that had just recently moved here also
really
still pop around every once in a while. Absolutely. Yeah. So it's like, it's a very noticeable thing in like Ukrainian pockets of the United States.
And you mentioned also the sort of casualties in the front lines. The advances on the southern and eastern sides got pushed back to like around the Dnieper River. Apologies if I'm butchering the pronunciation on that. Dnieper. And that's where the front lines have calcified. It's basically been a stalemate for like 3 years at this point.
A lot of drone warfare has sort of been like the main method of war, I feel like, in the last couple of years.
Unsurprisingly, this has also had an impact on fertility rates. It has not been positive. In Russia, the fertility rate ticked down from 1.5 pregnancies per woman down to 1.4 in 2022. In Ukraine, it plummeted from 1.1, which was already quite low, down to 0.9 in 2022.
Pretty substantial.
And as we were mentioning, when you go to war, a significant sustained war, you need to retool your entire economy and political system around the war, because economically you need to move stuff to the front, and in terms of manpower, you need more people. In January 2024, so 2 years into the war basically, the Kremlin declares that it is the year of the family. And in tandem with this, Putin signs an executive order defining a household with 3 or more children, and of course a married man and woman, as a so-called large family. This is a new legal categorization in Russia where if you have 3 or more children, you're a large family and you get increased government support. And these payouts, you get them until your oldest child turns 18 or 23 if they're a full-time enrolled student. And June, why don't you go ahead and read this straight from the executive order here?
There are also support measures in the field of labor relations, early access to an old age insurance pension for women who have given birth to and raised 3 or more children. Parents raising multiple children are offered vocational education and further vocational education to ensure quality employment. Large families also have the right to free visits to museums, cultural and recreational parks, and exhibitions throughout the Russian Federation, regardless of their place of residence, subject to the procedure and conditions defined in each region. The executive order provides for the creation in Russia of a database on large families, monitoring their social and economic situations and implementing social support measures for such families by constituent entities of the Russian Federation.
They really said, we're making the big family database.
we are watching you. We're
watching you.
All of the big families.
So I think the first thought that I had is like, oh, wow, this really echoes what Orban tried to do in Hungary.
Absolutely.
Like, make big families a special class of family subject to special privileges.
I think it's fascinating looking at the history of Russia with some of its policies in regards to like pro-natalist policies date back to the early 2000s, and some of them were like fairly aggressive, like the vouchers for $10,000 at the time. And then you look now and it's a lean into the more cultural aspect of it, where it's like, oh, we're gonna congratulate you, you're just a nice big family and we honor you with awards, and you get a special classification.
Right.
It echoes the far right cultural aesthetic that we've been seeing sort of bubble up to the surface in the last 5 years or so, or even longer at this point, where it's sort of all about aesthetics. It's about this cultural aesthetics, domination of culture. It's about the traditional values, which I don't think, like, I think it works for the people in that world, in that base. And of course, a lot of Russians love Putin, so maybe it works for more people there than the United States. But talking more broadly, like in regards to like Hungary and the United States, I feel like that just like doesn't really work unless the population is 100% already on board with the leadership, you know? Like, I feel like that's just pure rhetoric for the base.
Maybe. I mean, something that you have to think about, though, in the case of Russia is that they didn't start here. You know, this is where they've gotten to after 24 years under Putin.
Yeah.
24 years. Think about that.
Time.
Genuinely. 4 years technically under Dmitry Medvedev, but like, come on, you know? When one person is in control for a quarter century, it seriously reshapes a country's national identity.
That's true. And it's hard to, I think, imagine that. And, you know, Donald Trump has been a part of, I think, United States politics for over 10 years at this point, sadly.
Right.
But it is a lot different. Russia is a lot more, within Russia, it's a lot more united under him. And
right.
It's 24 of 25 years is a long time. I mean, when Putin
now
dies,
it's 26 years.
26 years.
As of today. Oh my God.
Whenever Putin dies or finally steps down, I mean, I think assuming Russia is continuing on the same path, they're going to look at him as a national hero in a way that I don't think Trump will never quite be, or Orban will ever quite be for Hungary.
I would agree with that. Obviously, this all could change, you know.
Yeah, this is all kind of conjecture on a certain level, yeah.
But I'm with you that it seems to me like there is this interest. I don't know. I remember talking a very long time ago to a friend of mine in Russia who I knew through a fucking internet forum. I remember I was talking to him around the time that Putin was really starting to consolidate power. And he was just like, you don't get it. Like, as an American, you don't get it. Mm-hmm. Russia loves a strong man. Like, that's just how Russians are. Is we, if we can give power to a guy who promises to take care of us, or a woman, I guess, in the case of Catherine, right?
Yeah.
Then that man being the head of state, we just love it. We love it.
They go nutty for it. Yeah.
Like, even if there are reservations, frustrations, and concerns about liberties, that strength and that ability to govern through strength is something that is incredibly appealing throughout the history of Russia.
I think Trump does function in a very similar way, and wants to continue. The average American does not think of a leader in that same way. But I do think it is still fascinating, like 2-ish years into the war of Ukraine, they were like, we need to like really up the birth rate in a very aggressive way.
Yeah, so now it's like the year of the family.
Yeah, year of the family, year of Luigi. Everything is Everything's family themed.
There's one last thing I wanted to say, though, before we move on from this, which is that I think that Americans who don't think that something like this could ever happen here are deluding themselves. At the end of the day, power is not exactly about people. Obviously, people are the ones who manage to leverage these resources, but it's about the amount of authority that people are willing to give over.
Yeah.
And we have given up and given over so much over the course of not just the Trump administration, but the administrations before that as well.
I mean, especially Bush is what I think of.
Yes. Yeah. And Obama as well, you know, and Biden. Like, in terms of the actual power vested in the executive, they didn't give that power back, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I guess in a way, which is interesting because it kind of correlates the timeline under Putin as president from 2000 to now, where the post 9/11 world, not even just in the United States, but globally, is sort of a story about the loss of rights, handing over of rights. And, you know, not all of it is necessarily people doing it with permission, but it has a lot to do with the increased technological advancement of like the surveillance state. A lot of that does correlate between both countries.
I think we're a lot more like them than we are willing to admit. You know, I was talking with somebody the other day, and this is actually the entire reason I wanted to do an episode about Russia, was that I met somebody recently who is a Russian expat, and she's lived here for a while. And she was just telling me about how she saw the signs early on, and then she moved. She wasn't planning to stay, but she saw what kept happening back home. And now she's seeing it happen here as well.
That doesn't, you know, I don't like to hear that.
Neither do I.
I think there is still a chance for the United States, but we are certainly like on that cliff. We're on that cusp point.
This is the inflection point right now, for 100%. Sure.
Yeah.
Putin at this point is 2 years into his 6-year term. And that's the other thing. Terms used to be 4 years. Now they're 6 years. Again, he changed the rules. He will be allowed to run again in 2030 because of that constitutional amendment we just read, which means that he could potentially be president for another decade, at least.
God, dude. Torture. Absolute torture. I do think it is fascinating that he realized fairly quickly, his government realized fairly quickly that he probably, to be sustainable long-term in this powerful wartime Russia that he sort of began to lean into, that he needs to up the pro-natalist rhetoric pretty substantially. I think that is really notable here.
And it keeps getting weirder. That's the thing about this pro-natalist rhetoric, is that the deeper down the rabbit hole you go, the weirder you sound.
Yeah.
I found some remarks that were from Putin. He gave remarks at this university in Kaliningrad, and he said, this is me quoting directly, this is a machine translation from the Russian, so it might not be perfect, but it gets the point across. A young woman first wants to get an education. Here, and by here, he means like here and now in Kaliningrad, 77% of the population wants to get a higher education. 10 years ago, it was only 50%, and now it's 77%. So first get an education, then a higher education, then post-education, then take the first steps in a career, achieve some result. And everything is important, and everything is necessary, and it seems to be right. And it's called the postponed first child, he said. That's why the first child appears around 30. There's no energy or time for the second one. And in order to ensure the growth of the population, it is necessary at least to have 3 children in the family. And for that to happen, the family must be born early.
Oh my God,
he said this to a bunch of like 18 to 22-year-olds at a university in Kaliningrad.
Dear Lord. I mean, the far right, the far right ideologue absolutely sees, especially women getting education and having that freedom to have a career, as a problem.
This is no different from the rhetoric that we have heard on this show from so many different people.
Yeah.
It's the same.
Yeah. I mean, he might as well just say that feminism has been a disaster for society. That's absolutely what this is.
And meanwhile, I'm like, well, maybe you shouldn't have started an unnecessary war and fed 1.5 million of your men into a fucking wood chipper, you know?
Yeah. I mean, also the thing, I don't think we've ever super directly talked about this as we have progressed into the 2020s, more women get higher educations than men, and women, especially because for the longest time, of course, could not get education, could not have jobs, could not do all of that. Women value that freedom to be able to live on their own and not have to rely on like marrying a man or something like that. There is a lot of value in that. And the far right does not see that as a good thing. They find that to be a problem. They call it the postponement of the first child. Apparently having your first child at 30 is just a bad thing for them.
Yeah, well, June, it's a postponement. This should be happening earlier.
It should be. Yeah, there's like a moral implication there.
Yes.
Yeah, that you need to have it in your like early 20s.
This also reminds me of that stuff that we were talking about in the last main episode. That fucking Lyman Stone piece where he was like, it was the same fucking rhetoric where it was like, these ladies need to be having babies younger because if they don't, we'll be all out of abort license plates by the year 2100,
Yeah, it is so weird when you look at any far right leader in any country, any government. There's, of course, the differences between policy. There's some differences here and there. But when you get down to natalism, it is the exact same thing all across every single country.
Another one of the articles that I read while I was doing research for this episode was about the current sort of state of affairs regarding reproduction and women wanting to reproduce in Russia, like as of 2022. And what they found was that if you are really on board with the war, you probably are going to be wanting to have children at about the same rate as before the war because you think the country's on the right track. But the thing is, if you're not on board with the war, you're so much less likely to have children, which makes sense. Like, this is very logical that, like, being in a war is not good for birth rates. We've talked about this repeatedly. Whether you are the aggressor or the one being aggressed upon, either way, it's really not good for birth rates.
It's two-pronged in a way where it's like you have the lack of optimism in society. It's it's not. It doesn't feel good to be in a war necessarily,
especially a war that's been in stalemate for fucking 3 years.
Yeah, and to not even mention the fact that people who are married, men will be on the front lines. I don't know if Russia deploys women. I genuinely have no idea. But there is a separation of families from the front lines of the war to families back at home or like a spouse back at home. So it is also just harder. For, I guess, reproduction in that way.
Yeah.
It feels weird to say
or raising your fucking family, right? Like, you want to tell me that your average mother whose, husband has been on the front lines for a year and a half is just going to be like, oh, I love my wonderful family, and every day I dream of my husband coming home from the war. No, she's going to be fucking pissed, She's going to be dealing with these children with maybe some sort of like a support system in place, but not the same support system that she would have if her partner were there with her. And she's not going to be having a good time.
Overall, it seems like it's sort of a disaster for like everyone involved, of course, for Russia, of course, absolutely. And I think that's why the attempts to bring about this year of the family culture and the family awards, which I cannot wait for us to get to.
Cannot wait to talk about the family awards.
But I mean, I think that's why it feels so desperate. There's a level of desperation where at first when you told me about the vouchers, where it's like, okay, that's like a policy that's tangible that I could see kind of doing something for someone. This is just like pomp and circumstance for what?
For the fatherland, I guess.
Yeah. And like, what does that even mean? There's
some other stuff that I found, by the way, that's going on now where they've been trying to promote having kids to people who are younger and younger and younger, which kind of makes sense. If you think about the fact that, like, when you're a young man who is of military service age, pretty soon you're going to get drafted and you're going to have to go fight in the war. You need to get those babies born early. And as such, in the schools, there has been more anti-abortion and abstinence-only style sex education. Oftentimes, this is led by priests. Dude. Like, actual Russian Orthodox priests will go into the schools to be like, and this is why you should not abort your beautiful child. And they talk so much about the concept of the large family. They are always like, you need to have 3 or more kids.
Dear God, it's top down. That is that is a real like cultural attempt here to completely reorient how I think sort of the goal here is to have less people go to university. I think Putin would see that as a positive, especially because he brought up the rates 10 years prior, which if I could just scroll up here, but I believe 10 years prior, the birth rate was closer to 2 in Russia.
In 2015, their fertility rate peaked at 1.8.
Yeah, so he probably looks at that time as like less people in universities, less women in universities, better for our birth rate.
We can get it back up again. Yeah. Another thing that's been going on, I guess, is that schools take kids on trips to civil registry offices, like where the local bureaucrats sign papers to learn about what documents you need to file when you get married and or have a child.
Come on.
And in some cases, this even includes like mock wedding ceremonies where they'll have a boy and a girl stand and like do a little fake wedding. And they'll be like, now that you're married, you have to sign these papers. And this is how signing papers works when you get married, boys and girls. Isn't that great?
This is just comical. This is so funny.
Dumb.
Bring them to the park. Bring them to a museum. Show them dinosaurs. What are we doing here?
We need to bring them to the county clerk's office, June.
I'll be so honest. If I was a kid and they're like, we're going to go watch a fake wedding today. When I was a kid, I already hated going to weddings. I hated going to fucking Catholic weddings. That shit was boring.
Okay, well, can I introduce you in having a couple of your classmates get fake married, maybe in like a 10-minute ceremony, and then you can spend the rest of the time looking at all the forms that you have to fill out to make it official?
Dude, I feel like
actually, I think I would have loved that as a kid. Not even lying. I think I would have had a good time with that.
Yeah, you probably would. You're a theater kid. You probably would have been like, no, It
wouldn't be the theater side of my brain. It would not be the right side of my brain. It would be the left side of the brain. I would be so obsessed with the fucking paperwork. I shit you not. I'm sick. I'm deeply sick.
You love a graph. You love data. But if I had to go through that personally, like you would love the paperwork. You love organization. I already became a Reddit atheist. I was an insufferable atheist in high school. This would have if I had experienced this, it would have created a new type of Reddit atheist, not yet even perceived of in the United States. Like that, we have not even experienced the type of like anti-authority, religiosity type of person. We've never seen that in America.
That's the thing that's so fucking goofy to me about this shit is like you take your average 16-year-old and make them sit around at, again, the equivalent of a county clerk's office talking about the paperwork that is necessary for a childbirth, for a wedding, for things like that.
Yeah.
They're going to be clowning on, like, the moment that they are out of earshot of the teacher, every single last one of them is going to be like, that's the stupidest fucking thing I have ever had to do.
Yeah. I'm very curious to know if we have someone listening to the show that has experienced one of these mock wedding ceremonies. Please let us know if you have. Dear Lord, I need to know what that's like.
So far, this episode, I think, has been pretty serious. This is rough stuff and this is scary stuff, but I wanted to give us a little bit of dessert. So we are going to now talk about, I think, the single silliest thing that Putin has spun up to promote natalism in Russia, and that is the Family Awards.
Yeah, this shit had me fucking laughing my ass off, dude.
In Russia, there are various awards that are given out for various purposes, and this is actually in the tradition of something that we talked about a little while back, which is the Mother Heroine Award, which the Soviet Union would give to mothers who had a certain number of children.
Right.
Now, Putin brought this back in May 2008. He called it the Order of Parental Glory. 2008 was also the year of the family, by the way.
They've had a lot of those, I guess.
So far, there are at least 2 years of the family they have had that I know of. 2008 and 2024. Yeah.
They need to give something else a chance here. Like, the family's gotten so many years at this point. Like, there's got to be, like, come on. There's got to be, like, the year of the furry. Like, they don't even have, like, come on. There's so many other options here.
The year of the refurbished AK-47 assault rifle. Yeah.
Yeah, there's so much they could do, and they fucking wasted on the family.
Basically, the way that the Order of Parental Glory works is that if you have raised 7 or more children, you can apply to become a member of the order. And what you get is a certificate, a little medal that you can pin on your jacket.
How nice.
And what was in 2008 50,000 rubles. They've indexed it to inflation. This is about $3,000-ish. And then in 2022, they brought back the Mother Heroine Award. If you've given birth to and raised 10 or more children, you can be the Mother Heroine of Russia.
That's so many kids, dude. That's so many.
Now, June, I sent along a video to you from the June 2026 Mother Heroine Award ceremony, which I believe was at the Kremlin. And you watched this video.
I did,
right?
yeah.
I've got some notes, but I'm curious to hear your first thoughts about this ceremony.
Like, the first thing I think of with this in particular is just the same thing I think I've been thinking about a lot of, like the corniness of it all, right? Like the performativeness of the aesthetic that the right globally has been using for so long, that it is like it is about performance, it is about aesthetic.
Yep.
This is immaterial in any real way, like in terms of what this achieves. Like, okay, there's 10 families that get up on stage, shake the hands of Putin, do like a little photo shoot with them on stage in front of all the other families, and they're all smiling, and it's like, it's a show. The main thing for me is just how performative all of this feels. There's not like a policy here that is like, or anything real that anyone could ever really like. These people sure can get whatever awards, they can get their little medal or whatever, and like a little bit of money in their pockets. 99% of Russians are never going to have 10 children. This is all for show. This is all a performance. And that is like the only thing that I can think about up front when I see stuff like this. And it is the consistent thing we've seen with the far right. Just generally, everything is a performance. Everything is about aesthetics. Everything is about cultural dominance. And
it's valorizing these individual people who have made these decisions in their own lives as exemplifying Russian excellence or whatever.
Yeah. And I guess what that means is just having a lot of children for the fatherland.
You're right that like the ceremony itself is fucking nothing. I didn't realize until watching this, like I've seen some of Putin's speeches on the global stage where he's a somewhat engaging speaker, but here he clearly is just reading what is on the goddamn piece of paper in front of him, you know?
Yeah.
And he's so boring.
Yeah, and maybe it's just that he's older now, and maybe it is just like a function of age doing that. Because, you know, Biden, when he was Obama's vice president, he had a lot more energy. He was a little bit more engaging, I thought.
Yeah, he's 74 now, actually. Shit.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just happens when you get. I mean, of course, that happens when you get older. You just get a little bit more low energy Putin. But he also probably just is checked out. Like, got to be honest, this would not be a fun ceremony to be at. Like, it's just like, okay, gotta say something about this next family, shake their hands, and then just keep going. It is like, I think, Josh, you're going to link this video in the show notes. But I do recommend checking it out because it is so jarring, especially with some of the families, the way they're dressed. It is very traditional, what I assume is traditional Russian, like, dress.
I think they're representing, they're either wearing traditional Russian dress or traditional dress from wherever it is that they are from. Like, one of the families looked like it was a bit more of like a Caucasian thing going on. In some of these family ceremonies, you see people who are like from Siberia and they have their whole own thing going on. But yeah, the idea is that this is going way back. We are preserving tradition. We are, more accurately, we are preserving our imagined version of tradition.
And that sort of plays into, I think, how Putin has been trying to frame his rule of Russia and Russia's current place in the world, where this is the eternal Russia. This is the Russia that goes all the way back. A very intentional aspect of all of this, I think. The one thing, he might be boring, but he is very intentional with how he presents Russia, the country.
Well, and one great example of that is the first speech that he gives before he starts the awards. There is nothing more important than true family values. It is they that give the most reliable support, and there is nothing more for a person to be happy than to be a parent. Day by day, we see how children learn about the world and grow up. Preservation of traditional family values, protection of childhood, respect for the elderly, parental work, all these are the most important things that unite our society and are passed down from from generation to generation. They help us to move forward together with confidence. In general, a number of countries, unfortunately, are trying to abolish traditional family values. We will provide support to those who, having faced such pressure, come to Russia to live, work, and raise their children. Welcome. In general, we are trying to create all the conditions for as many multiracial families as possible in Russia. It is clear that the number of such families as yours is growing, as well as the number of young people who would like to have 2, 3, 4, or more children in their own future. I am sure that your example, which is, I repeat, real human parental happiness, will become really inspiring for many people.
There is an attack on the theoretical family, as if there are people trying to like abolish getting married, which of course is just referencing, I think, gay marriage, which they have outlawed, and it's, you know, less people getting married, as if it's some sort of institutional threat upon people getting married, which is just so funny to me. You see JD Vance say that sort of thing all the time, where there is like a threat of family. There is people don't value the family anymore, which is just, it's silly. It's such a silly, like, thing that is not real. It's a fake threat.
And it's also interesting hearing him talk about how we're trying to create conditions for multiracial families in Russia. And by multiracial, he here pretty much just means of different ethnicities, white ethnicities within Russia. You know, he's not talking about people moving up from fucking Central Africa.
Of course
obviously. He means the different races like Slav or Armenian or, you know, whatever. That's what he's talking about here. It doesn't matter whether you're Latvian or Georgian. You too are welcome in Russia, you know?
Yeah. The whiter, the better.
One of the fathers gives this speech, and they all line up to suck Putin off here, by the way. He's like, yeah, I live 30 kilometers away from the front, and we've been able to open up a bakery. We bake 3,000 buns a day, and it's all thanks to you, Vladimir Putin, which I guess in a sense it is all thanks to him. Like the front line would not be there were it not for Putin. He's not wrong. It's not what he meant, but
he's right, I suppose.
The one that really blew my hair back, though, was the French guy.
I'll be honest, I'm blanking out which one that was.
He was the guy who was speaking in French.
I didn't notice that. Holy shit. No, I didn't notice that there was someone speaking in French. What?
There's a guy, yes, and he keeps talking about relationships between Russia and La France. He's like, I'm so fortunate that my whole family and I were able to move to Russia. He's like, I'm going to give you a statue of the Holy Virgin. That thing that everybody in France loves?
Wait.
The Virgin Mary? What are you talking about?
No, I feel like because every once in a while you'll see people talk about going to Russia. Like Americans, I'll see Americans talk going to Russia, visiting Russia.
No,
Tucker
this
Carlson
is
one of these people.
French guy who moved his family to Russia. This is insane.
You have to be a real freak, I feel like, especially in the last couple of years, to move to Russia.
Yeah, especially from a place like France, right? Like, it's one thing if maybe you're in, I don't know, Serbia or something, right? Like, you're close, maybe you already speak some of the language, whatever. It's still not a great idea, to be clear, but, like, I can see it. Why the fuck would you move from France to Russia with your 10 kids? That's insane.
I do think there is just that unity that we've been seeing among like far right people where they probably do value. I mean, we see far right movements all across the world. In France especially, we see that.
It's probably a political thing, yeah.
I'm sure
or maybe this guy is like an intelligence double agent or something like that, and he's getting political asylum. Like, genuinely, that might be. It might be something like that. I don't know. But the other thing that I love about this video of the Mother Heroine Awards is the comments. Did you look at the comment section?
I actually did. Not super deep, but I did see that. I mean, there was a lot of glazing of Russia and Putin, especially in this.
Let's read some of these comments just for. They all have very real names, by the way. Here we have at Dave Hud -M3T, very normal username that a real guy would definitely have, who says, I can't believe you did something that makes me smile throughout, and I can hear your lovely voice, which makes me delighted. Smiling emoji, smiling with hearts emoji. I love that you show appreciation to familyhood and parenthood. My Vladimir Putin, I don't only love you, I consider you my own family and my world. Smiling emoji, 2 hearts emoji, flower emoji. I wish I can express all how I feel about this, but I hope you understand how you make me feel. Heart emoji.
This is some real fucking like glazing activity here. But again, the thing is like it could be bots.
Oh, it's gotta be.
But like also like you pointed out before, a lot of people vote for this guy. A lot of Russia. Again, it's I think something that you I think properly relayed is it's hard to really truly understand just how much people really fucking love a strong man. They really like this guy.
Okay, here's one that I think is actually a real guy who is a real but weird guy. This is DAAF577. President Vladimir Putin aren't perfect man. However, his qualities has him above the of world leaders and politicians. I wish I was born in Russia, Russian flag emoji, Federation, Iran, Iranian flag emoji, and Spain, Spanish flag emoji. I love heart emoji, these 3 countries unconditionally. I love heart emoji, USA, USA flag emoji, and Federation Republic of Germany, German flag emoji. Russians are blessed from Yahweh with greatest leadership and believer in Yeshua, my Messiah.
What is happening there, dude? What is any of that? The unholy alliance, the craziest alliance of countries I've ever seen. I love the United States, Iran, Russia, and Spain, and Germany.
And Germany, yeah.
Germany, what is happening
there? A classic alliance.
Oh, God. But the thing is this is a totally type of, like, believable kind of person.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how, again, it could be fake.
I think most of these are bot comments, but I think a handful of these are real guys, and that to me is even stranger.
Yeah, and I guess that is something to point out is that I think it was sometime in 2025, late 2025, bot activity has surpassed human activity in terms of a majority of activity online as of last year. So
and Russia, obviously, along with Israel and the good old US of A, are the places that these bots tend to come from.
Oh, yeah.
So that's the Mother Heroine Awards, the sort of like Temu version of the Soviet medal of the same name.
Yeah. And I have to say, fairly boring.
Really boring.
Ceremony. It does not have a lot of like I would not watch again. Like I tuned in that one time for this one that happened back in June. I would not tune in again. It was real boring.
You know what I would tune in again for though is Family of the Year. Who will be the Family of the Year?
They put a lot more effort to give a little credit. They made this one pretty goofy. This is the one where I just was in disbelief at some of the things that happened here, some of the images that came from the Family of the Year award.
So this is a big, like, Eurovision style ceremony with lots of big lights and whatever on stage. It's a major production. And this happens at the National Center, which is this huge cultural and convention center that is currently being built in Moscow. It's one of Putin's, like, signature. This award was established in 20. And ever since its establishment, they have awarded Family of the Year in 5 different categories. If you're a family in Russia, you can submit. And I think that, like Eurovision, you like get judged on the local level first, and then they send you along to the national competition.
That's so stupid, dude.
But
this is it's so funny. There's locals. They have locals, and then they go to the regionals and the nationals. Dear Lord.
But your categories here for Family of the Year are large family, which is, of course, the Russian more than 3 children family. They've really dialed into this concept, the large family concept, where they want you to be that, you know?
Yeah.
There's also young family, which is when the parents are under the age of 35.
They really like that one.
Oh, yeah. There's rural family, which is if they're from a rural area. There's the golden family, where the parents have been married for 30 or more years.
I just love that name for that.
Agreed.
The Golden family. It's just it's I don't know. There's just something about it. I really can't like put my finger on why I love the Golden family. It sounds like it's from
funny.
a video game.
It is. Yeah. Yes. Or what does it sound like? I'm trying to think of what it's making me think of in my brain when I hear Golden family. No, I got nothing. It's just really funny.
It's just a ridiculous name.
And then the fifth category is family keeper of traditions. And this is a family that is preserving some sort of like cultural significance or like a line of historical culture in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
Again, very heavy here on like the goofy dresses and shit. Well, not goofy. They're pretty dresses, but you know what I mean? It's like, it's being like, oh, these are the people who keep the book of something. I think. I don't know.
I think what it is probably the different like ethnic makeup of the region, like the native populations.
Yeah.
Because like as we've said, I think Russia under Putin especially is like they're sort of pro-white before they are pro like anything else.
Mm-hmm.
But I think from the little bit I do know about Russia, there is like a pretty heavy like native population in like the Northeast,
especially in Siberia. Yeah,
that I think he can't just like ignore necessarily. Right. So I feel like this is sort of like him leaning into the like, hey, you know, we're all, again, I think this is one of the pieces that let him lean into the United Russia.
Yes,
the United Russian front.
We are all one big Russian family.
Yeah, Russian before anything else in that way, yeah.
This sort of propaganda, I suppose, is necessary because otherwise you might have indigenous communities in different places fight for self-determination, which would not be okay.
And from what I've seen, just in doing like a little bit of research and for this episode, he does seem to do like at least the bare minimum of like lip service and like politics to sort of, I think, get some of these different indigenous groups to sort of like him a little bit.
Yeah, but it's in a tokenizing way, I
Absolutely
guess, is the thing that I think earlier when I was talking about Putin's approach to a multi-ethnic Russia.
Yeah.
It is very much tokenizing in the sense that, yeah, we'll celebrate these traditions and these cultures, but you know, they're part of the Russian tapestry.
Right.
But you know what is really Russian? Russia. You know?
Totally, 100% agree. Yeah.
Like, it kind of reminds me of the narrative about the United States, where it's like, oh, sure, like you've got the American Indians or whatever, right? You've got those tribes and you've got those reservations, but like, that was in our past. And, you know, now they're just sort of part of the country.
100%. Yeah. And the United States pays that lip service after, of course, the United States genocided and took all of the land from the native population in the United States.
And then gave a little bit of it back in big ol' air quotes. Yeah.
That, and even went so far as to like name a lot of cities and different regions in the country after some of these different tribes and figures, and, you know, honor certain figures in that way. But that's like, it's all lip service. It's there's not actual real.
Yeah, it's integrating sort of this story and these people into the national identity in terms that are favorable to the hegemon.
Right.
And it's very similar, I think, here in Russia, where you get to gloss over all of the shortcomings of the state and you get to minimize the unique differences in favor of this idea of like, well, you're like spicy Russian, basically.
Yeah. No, I think you're totally right.
Now, a new category was also announced for the 2025 edition of the awards.
Oh my God, I can't wait. A new category. Oh my God. Spice up the competition a little bit.
And it's called Defender of the Fatherland. June, do you want to read the description of who gets this award or who can get this award?
Yeah, absolutely. The Family of a Defender of the Fatherland category brought together 15 families, a total of 98 people, including 68 children, 14 of which are large families.
Okay, that's double dipping. Not fair. Not fair.
I guess we can think of this as like you know how like the Oscars has a lot of awards, right? There's a lot of Oscars, right? But when people think of the Oscar, they think of, you know, like the best, the one Oscar people talk about mostly is like the best picture of the year or whatever. This is like the best picture for the family awards. I
think so. I think you're right. Yeah.
Yeah. In these families, one or more members are or have been participants in combat operations, including the special military operation. Many of them have successfully returned to civilian life and are actively involved in socially significant projects, volunteer, and patriotic movements. These are families in which the memory of military feats, history, and civic engagement are intertwined. They serve as an example, showing that being a defender of the country also means being an active citizen, ready to help veterans, organize children's patriotic events, and take part in commemorative initiatives. So it is like the totality of, like, I feel like the Russian culture of, you will join the military, you will be the face of heroism, you will help expand the Russian front, you will be a large family at a minimum, hopefully more, and you will also completely buy into the Russian nationalistic project. It is like a very all-encompassing, I think, of the last 10 years of like Putin's identity, I think.
Yeah, I was honestly startled when I came across this, because it's like, of all of the things that I came across in my research, I don't think anything better encapsulated Putin's approach to natalism than this stupid fucking bullshit award. It's meaningless. It gives you nothing other than, I guess, the respect and admiration of these other families who are at the awards. And there's no actual monetary or other benefit to it that you can take home with you. But in environments where there is very little actual financial compensation available for anything, when resources are limited, you start trading on these bullshit shows of respect. And everybody is expected to take these bullshit shows of respect and be like, well, my God, I did it. Like, and to the point of how, like, Putin took some of the worst lessons away from growing up in the Soviet Union. It's bullshit like this. These commendations, particularly toward the end, which were fundamentally meaningless, but they were expected to take them and be like, well, I'm the best boy.
Best Boy Award. And I think that gets, I think you perfectly got to what I was trying to get at earlier when I was talking about how the modern far right leans so heavily into aesthetic, because it is that aesthetic, but I feel like it is super representative of, like, the end of empire in a sense.
Yes.
There is nothing else to be done except for give the Best Boy Awards to everyone, and to just be like, wow, we're really cool and great, and everything's actually really fine. The economy is great. Nothing to worry about here. It feels sort of like an acceptance that really nothing can be done. It is sort of a really subtle way of just being like, yeah, that, like, this is the best we can do. We can just nod and shake the hands of like the biggest boys and the biggest families.
Well, you think about the Kennedy Center, right? And it's like, why has Trump been so obsessed with refashioning the Kennedy Center in his own image? It's that's the place where people get the fancy awards. Genuinely.
Yeah, it is. And it's stuff like this, that it's the desperation. It is the, like, nothingness of like the modern fascist rhetoric and aesthetic that it somehow works for Putin, and it somehow works for Trump's base. But I feel like if you just like dig into it at all, it's just like, what does this mean? What is this? What does this do for anyone?
Exactly. What does working mean? Like, you said that this works for them, but in what capacity does it work? It hasn't worked in terms of boosting the fertility rate.
True.
Their fertility rate currently stands at 1.4, which is still much lower than it was in, like, the mid 2010s, and it's also down from where things before the war started. It is, I should note, a bit higher than Ukraine, Poland, and the Baltic states. The fertility rates in those countries are anywhere between 1 and 1.2, but Russia is not exempt from the prevailing trends that we see everywhere else, because as we've talked about on this show time and time again, you can do whatever you want to try to create a rhetorical environment where it's like, oh, you got to have a bunch of kids. But if people don't want to have kids, they're not going to have kids.
Like, do people really think that they went to the ceremony or watched this and they're like, I got to be on that stage. In 10 years, I'll be on that stage.
Like, that's me so up there.
Like, that's ridiculous. It's so stupid. I find it, that's why I think I find it so fascinating that the far right has continued to lean into this direction, because it clearly doesn't work. We have pretty direct evidence in multiple countries at this point that leaning into things like the Family of the Year award don't really do anything, but they continue to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I think it is sort of like representative of like a fall of an empire, where it is just like, this is their last gambit. This is like the only thing they can do. This is the only thing they can think of that could even attempt to do anything. And it doesn't, because people aren't optimistic. They started a war and doesn't have any signs of ending.
And they could stop the war tomorrow if they wanted. They could.
Yeah.
And go into negotiations around a peace treaty. And like doing that would do so much more to boost fertility rates and make the country happier and healthier and more productive. But they're not going to, because this mode of natalism, war natalism, sees the war as the most important thing, and everything under that rolls up into supporting the ongoing war. That's
right.
That's what it must be.
It does seem like a lot of this project in the last 10 years leading up to the Ukraine war, and especially after they started that, it does seem like that is what they're leaning into, is just to be like, we prioritize service in the army.
Mm-hmm.
We prioritize having as many children. And of course, it would be even better if a lot of these children were engaged in civic military life. Like that is absolutely what they're doing. I think what part of the reason why Russia has not tried to end this war yet is because, of course, if you start a war, you don't want to lose the war. If they end the war, they're going to have to concede on some level.
Yeah, but they're still
lost.
probably going to pick up some territory. That's what's so strange to me, is it's like they already functionally control all of the land up to the river. They're not going, like, I cannot imagine any negotiations in which they concede much of that land back. Maybe a bit, but like they have won some territory here. And they definitely get to keep Crimea, you know?
Totally. I think part of the thing here, this is just my pure conjecture, is that they probably want a more definitive victory because, as we saw with America in World War II, there was a pretty definitive victory in World War II, and that led to the baby boom. I mean, there was a lot of other factors there.
Yeah.
There was a ton of different factors. But if you win a war, there probably will, like a very large war, which is this is a fairly large war. I think he wants that substantial victory to lead to a baby boom in Russia specifically, is like where I'm thinking. That's why I think there has not been any concessions yet.
I think you're right.
He wants that post-war boom, which I don't think he'll get.
No, and it's like, it's been in this stalemate state for years. So it's like, you'll just keep dragging it out. And the longer you drag it out, the less likely you are to have any sort of population boom once all those men come back home.
Yeah. Seems like a disaster of Putin's own making, frankly, at this point.
But when your entire understanding of the world is about unifying this once grand thing that was then perverted into the Soviet Union, but was still powerful at that time and was then crushed underfoot by Western imperialism. If you want to return to that dream of the truly united Russia, you can't stop. You can't back off. The moment that you back off of anything, you have essentially failed. And I think that's where he's at.
I think so too. Josh, if you could win any of the illustrious 6 awards, the large family, young family, rural family, golden family, family keeper of traditions, or the family of a defender of the fatherland, what do you think? What do you think would be the like highest honor here? What would be the greatest one to win?
It's got to be golden family, right? Like,
it does.
I'm obsessed. I'm obsessed because I like the idea. Actually, now what I'm realizing is that for some reason when I hear golden family, first of all, it sounds like a Chinese restaurant.
Wait, you're so right. And it would have, like,
I was trying to place it for the longest time, and it sounds like an American style Chinese restaurant, like a takeout place.
The signs would be completely faded by this point, and you know that chicken would be fire.
Like,
you know it's going to be so good. Golden. I bet you there's a golden family in 10 miles of both of us in both Chicago and New York. I bet you there's a golden family. Yeah.
So maybe that's what I'll say is, even if I can't win a Golden Family Award, maybe I can just go walk like a few blocks away from here and get myself some fucking sweet and sour chicken. And I'll feel like I'm my own Golden Family.
We're all Golden Family. We're a Golden Family here.
We are. We are a golden family here. You're all golden babies. Thank you for listening for yet another week of Ill Conceived. And we'll see you next week for the B-side.
See ya.